Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see so many familiar names. We're noticing a lot of returning folks coming back to join us in this conversation. So welcome to everyone here. We're going to get started in just a minute, but in the meantime, please let us know who you are. So in the comment box, drop in your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from. Hi, welcome. Welcome, everyone. So if you're just joining us, let us know who you are. In the comment box, just drop in your name, your pronouns, and where you are joining us from. And today's conversation, we're going to be talking about having difficult conversations and how to respond to microaggressions. Welcome, welcome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started now. And throughout this whole session, feel free to use the comments section as sort of your Q&A. That's how you'll be able to interact with our instructors today. And so my name is Carlos. I use he and they pronouns. I am coming at you today from Oakland, California, and I am the content director at Change Lawyers. For those of you who don't know, Change Lawyers is a legal foundation, and we fund the next generation of lawyers and activists. And this class that you are sitting in right now, this is part of Leaders Forum. Leaders Forum is our 2022 Leadership Development Academy. It's open to everyone, lawyers, activists, and anyone who wants to make an impact. And we're talking about skills that will help us become better leaders. Things like imposter syndrome, how to respond to microaggressions, which is today's topic. Next week, we're going to be talking about interviews and how to interview better, which is a skill that for a lot of us who are BIPOC, we don't learn. No one ever teaches us. And so we're really excited to once again be partnering with the folks at Hella Social Impact for today's session. And I myself am going to be taking a lot of notes because microaggressions is something that I have always struggled with and sort of leaves me frozen in time when I hear one. It's kind of like a deer in the headlights moments. So I'm going to be introducing now our instructors. You'll recognize Lynn from all of our previous sessions. Welcome, Lynn. Nice to have
Carlos.
you. And today, Lynn is going to be joined by Adita. Welcome, Adita.
Thank you so much. Hi.
All right, well, you all take it away, and I'll be back at the end of the hour.
Thank you. Hey, Adita.
Hi, Lynn.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to meet you.
Yeah, I'm seeing some familiar names too coming up in the comments. So some folks are out there who know me. But if you don't know me, I'm Lynn Johnson, co-founder and CEO of Hella Social Impact. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am actually coming to you from the ancestral lands of the Pueblo and Navajo people in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I want Adita for the folks to get to know you. Can you give us your intro?
Happy to. Hi, my name is Adita Rodriguez. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Carlsbad, California, which is in San Diego County. It is on native Kumeyaay land. I identify as Latina and mixed Latina and white. And more specifically, I'm Chilean American first generation on my mother's side. I am a daughter, a sister, a tia, a wife, and a mother to two young children, Camila and Cash, and to a miniature doxie named Maya. And then what I will tell you is I love trips to Disneyland, Trader Joe's, and Costco. In any order, they are all magical to me.
Can you go to the mall on the same day, or is that just overstimulation?
The mall?
No, all of them. Like, could you go to Disneyland, Trader Joe's, and Costco in the same day, or do they have to be spaced out?
They have to be spaced out. I could do Costco and Traders in the same day, but Doing anything besides Disneyland on a Disneyland day is doing too much.
Adita is also a founder of Hella Social Impact. That's okay. You know, you gotta do your humanity introduction first. And Stefania Pomponi, who usually joins me, our business partner and colleague, is not with us today because she is with her family in Hawaii. So we're going to dive into today's topic, which is today's title is Hella Courageous Conversations: How to Confront Harm and Microaggressions in the Workplace. So we want to start with a little scenario. And Carlos talked about kind of a little bit about how they feel when a microaggression happens. So we're gonna understand better how you feel when these things happen. So here you are. I want you to put yourself in a meeting room. All right. So you're at work, you're back at the office. Maybe you don't have to work at the office every day or anything like that post-COVID, but this particular meeting, you have to all be together. You're in the meeting room. It's an in-person meeting. You've been going for a couple hours and you're about to go on break for lunch, but you've been waiting 20 minutes. You've been DoorDash. You ordered DoorDash and you're watching the app, and it was supposed to come 20 minutes ago, and everyone's a little impatient and hungry. Finally, the Dasher arrives and drops off the food. Now, as the Dasher is leaving, Jeffrey, who's a director in your organization, rolls his eyes and says to no one in particular, "Oh, look at her. No wonder she was late." The room is silent. First questions. What feelings are coming up for you? What feelings come up for you in that moment? What feelings come up in that moment where the room is silent? Jeffrey has rolled his eyes and said, "Ah, look at her. No wonder our food was late." What feelings might come up for you? I'm also going to ask, what do you notice in your body? So we notice a feeling of uncomfortable, of awkward. What do you notice that your body is doing too? So we're noticing clutching my pearls. Yeah, there's upset, there's guilt, there's anger. There's that awkward, uncomfortable feeling. Maybe it manifests itself like when you're Aditi, when you're feeling awkward, where do you feel that in your body?
Oof, right here in my chest.
Yeah, like Tyler.
Yes.
That tight chest, the heart rate goes up.
My jaw starts to clench.
Uh-huh. There might be a feeling, Sarah says a feeling of helplessness. Yeah. And not sure how to react. So then, okay, good. So Sway says, not sure how to react, double taking what happened. Like, did that really happen? Blood pressure rises. The final question is, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? It might not be what you do, but in that moment,
it might not be what you do.
It might not be what you do, but what do you want to do? So you have those, so Sandra, you have those tense shoulders, your blood pressure might be rising. You might want to fight. Yeah, you might want to fight, Tyler says. Maybe you don't know what to do. Maybe it's just kind of like not sure. Let's put Sway says not sure how to react. What do you want to do next? Irma says, ask, what do you mean by that? Yep. right? So so Jeffrey just said this thing, this like thing, and maybe it's like, what do you want to do? Maybe it's take a deep breath. Yeah. You want to freeze. Whew. So these moments, unfortunately, are not unfamiliar to us, which is why we're here. And we want to, in this session, try to give you some ways to respond in that moment with Jeffrey. Um, or anything else similar to it. And we hope that you walk away from this hour with at least one way to respond that might be helpful. So I'm going to find the presentation in detail and turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I mean, some of the things I've seen already in here are things that we hadn't planned on presenting as part of our ways in the door, but I think that's exactly right. I love the deep breath. I love the question about the question of clarification. What do you mean by that as entryways also? So I love what I'm seeing in the chat as well. And like Lynn said, if you can just leave with one nugget, one pathway in, I think that's a great start.
So first of all, I think it's important for us to talk about why. So in this scenario, our theory, our recommendation, our leadership tells you that in that moment, we want everyone to feel like they have the power to do something in that moment, to enter into a courageous act, into a courageous conversation in that moment. And why? Why is that? Like, why do sometimes like it's often a choice to not do anything, which is fine. Like we sometimes we have to make that choice. We'll talk about that in a second. But why would we want to make the choice in that moment to enter into the conversation? And the reasons why is, first of all, because noticing what's happening in a room, in a situation, in an organization, and naming what's really happening are essential parts of showing up for racial justice. Many of you came to our first session where we talk about our framework, our racial justice spectrum, and we talk about the spectrum being notice, name, dismantle. Noticing being just paying attention to what's happening in that situation. It's hard to not notice when the room gets silent, when people start to shift in their seats, when there's like that feeling that inside of you where your chest gets tight and your blood starts to boil and you see kind of eyes darting around, noticing that that's going on, that the space has been made unsafe by someone's actions. And then being able to name it is just noticing an action, right? Something is going on here. And that is, and if we are all working to show up for justice, those acts of noticing and naming are key to putting ourselves in that position to really to make change. So it's really important. Second, when you name harm or name kind of dominant culture behavior, you're centering the needs and experiences of the most marginalized folks in the room. Now, we specifically chose a scenario where we did not tell you what Jeffrey looks like. We did not tell you what the dasher looks like. You know, you can make your own assumptions. We could have played it all out, but there's something happening, right, where there was some sort of power dynamic there, no matter what. And For sure, because Jeffrey was the director of the organization, this person was a DoorDash person. There was some kind of dominance happening and harm happening. And so even if you weren't like that upset by it necessarily, there are people in the room who were for various reasons. And to name what's happening really centers their experience. And that's also key to showing up for racial justice. Because what we need in this work, and you all know this more than most people we work with, is we need leaders with courage more than anything else to make real change. So doing something, saying something, choosing to step into a courageous conversation is practicing courage. It's really working out that courage muscle. And I wanted to say that the why is not about necessarily changing Jeffrey's mind. It's about your practice, not his. So you could go into it, and we'll talk more about this. You could go into this in a way to like make it be like, oh, we have to bring Jeffrey along. But that might not happen. You have no control over that. What you do have control over is your courage practice. Really quick, when we talk about courage and daring leadership, I can't not talk about Brene Brown and Brene Brown's research because it's been so pivotal in terms of helping us understand how to support leaders in kind of entering into brave situations. She says that we need braver leaders and more courageous conversations. There is in her book, this is from her book, Dare to Lead. In her book, she talks about the 4 skills of what courageous leadership looks like. Rumbling with vulnerability, right? That what she describes as that emotion we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So in that moment of like, oh shoot, this thing just happened. In order to be the first one to say something, you're rumbling with vulnerability. You're choosing to be vulnerable in that moment. You're choosing to live into your values, understanding what's most important to you, and aligning your actions around those values. In our next session, actually next month, we're going to be talking about values work. It's about braving trust, choosing to risk vulnerability, like piece by piece, moment by moment, one experience at a time. Trust is built on those moments, on deciding to enter into a courageous moment. And then it's like seeking opportunity from the discomfort of of mistakes, of missteps as learning and growth. And I present these because we're going to share with you, as always, we're going to give you some resources and links after the presentation. And one of the things that I find really helpful is Brene Brown's self-assessment around these skills as a way to kind of think about who you are as a brave and courageous leader. So I wanted to put that out there. But that's the why. The why is because we need courageous, brave leaders. And entering in gives you that opportunity. And this is really key for like folks across different racial groups, right? Because this is true for everybody. We all, no matter what, like as a Black person, I'm often kind of like, I have those same feelings of what do I do? Do I say something? What do I do? But sometimes like, I don't want to be the only person that says something, because normally it's people who look like me that say something. But sometimes we're the ones who are at most risk of saying something. So this is really important for white folks too, to be like, wait a second, I'm not going to let Black and brown folks be the person that says something. So how do I build my courage skills?
Now, thanks, Lynn. We're looking at some of the different roles in a situation or a microaggression where there's been something that's happened that's been problematic, something that's been said, an action that's been taken. Really, just for the purpose of this conversation, we've broken it down into 3 roles. We have you, and you looking at these, you may have found yourself in all of these roles at different times, or perhaps you're looking at the initiator and thinking about some missed opportunities, and we can talk about that as well. So we have the initiator, who is the person that is giving the feedback or bringing up the conversation. And that could mean that something happened to you, or you were, if you flip back to the bottom, an observer and something happened to somebody else, but you're the person that's initiating the conversation. We have the receiver. You may have been in this role before in your lifetime where you're receiving feedback about anything really. But the receiver is the person who needs to hear, who has potentially caused harm. And then we have the observer or the bystander. You're in that meeting. There's lots of people around. And this is where we also hear the term ally. This is if you're an observer or bystander and you're the person who then takes the initiative to start that courageous conversation, that's where you start to become and turn into an ally. I have a lot to say about this slide, but I'll try to keep it condensed. Okay, so we're going to get into some frameworks in a minute, but here's two of our very first pathways into courageous conversations. So if you could leave with one thing today, I think practicing the pause is such a powerful one that we practice at Hello Social Impact as well in our work. So this is naming an action. These are the scenarios where, again, you've noticed or heard something that's been said, that's been offensive, and whether it's to you or someone else, you're initiating, you're calling someone in, and practicing the pause is the time that you do it in the moment, where you find that courage to call someone in the moment. And this, we're setting expectations here. This is never going to be 100% comfortable, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of Lynn as well. It's a constant practice to be able to even get to this point of saying something, of speaking up. But really, this is, and you can literally use those words. I'm going to pause us for a moment. Write them down. I'm going to pause us for a moment. I'd like to name something that's happening. Even if you don't quite have the words, or even if you don't quite know what's happening and you're at a loss for words, but you have that feeling that Lynn described in your body, you know something problematic is happening and you're sort of in shock and you're stunned. And so you can't quite grasp the right thing to say. I think even just saying that, I'm going to pause us for a moment. I'm going to name that comment feels problematic, that I'm uncomfortable with what you just said. That is a pathway in. Even saying out loud, I don't quite have the words right now. I don't have the words to say what's happening, but I feel it, and I'm going to pause this because that does not feel right, what was said. So that's what we call practicing the pause. And then what we also practice at Hella, if you see someone in a situation where they've had the courage to sort of stop someone in their tracks, and they don't have quite the words, at Hello, we practice this because it gives someone else in the room the opportunity to maybe okay, I see what's going on. She's pausing them and I'm putting it together. Now Lynn's going to jump in and help me with this. So that's like level 2. But even just getting in there and stopping the conversation in its tracks is courageous. I think the second thing that I want to talk about is that it's never too late. You can always come back to a conversation as an initiator. And the way that you do this is find your words that work for you. I've laid out several different bullet points, but I've got some feedback for you, or there's something that's on my mind that happened in the meeting the other day that I'd like to speak with you about. When is a good time to talk? There's a situation that I'd like to address with you in the group. Can we make space at our next meeting? So you can always come back to something later. It's never too late. I also want to acknowledge that the risk for further harm, or reiterate, I should say, because Lynn brought it up, that's involved for marginalized folks and Black and brown folks in particular, is where we all need to think about the privileges that we hold. So I told you earlier that I identify as Latina and mixed Latina and white. I present white to a lot of folks. So what that means is that when I walk into a room, I might have a different experience. People might perceive something of me. Dominant culture might give me certain advantages that another Latina who has more melanin in her skin might not get. They might perceive her differently. So we need to think about our identities and also our privileges in particular, and how, I'm also able-bodied. So I need to think about how I can step up for people who are not able-bodied, and that start thinking like that, and where you can find opportunities to step up and become an ally. Because there is more risk for folks who are marginalized, and specifically for Black and people who identify as Black and brown. So I want to acknowledge that, and that also one thing before it slips my mind is that as someone who is marginalized if you're in a situation, you give yourself permission to not do the work. Lynn, do you have something to say about that? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about to share a couple of examples of times when I've stepped up, and they were, well, one of them was definitely an in the moment time when I wish I didn't have to be the one to have done it, right? But you know what I mean? Sometimes it's kind of like we as Black folks are don't want to have to do all that labor. So yeah, we have to be in this together. Yeah. Anyway, we have a couple of questions that we can address in this moment, or we can wait. Adita, there's one here about, can I ask you this question about in the setup moment, is it better to do it verbally or written? Especially if you're afraid of the reaction, we do it verbally. And then there's like a kind of, to me, this other one relates. The next one, asking permission to speak about harmful behavior seems problematic. Asking permission.
Yeah, maybe it was the word choice that I used. I'm not really asking for permission in the setup, but it could have been my word choice that sounded like it.
Yeah, can you speak about that? Like, what do you mean? What did you mean?
Me?
Yeah, yeah.
What did I mean by which part? What I'm saying is, you're not asking for permission. You're practicing. You're calling someone in, but it's at a later time. But maybe my word choice was problematic. Maybe it sounded like I was asking for permission in the way that I had set it up. But I'm not asking for permission. I need to speak to this person at a later time because I didn't do it in the moment. That's the point.
Yeah, and you've also said something about there's someone saying, I like that, found asking when would be a good time, not is there a good time. Yeah, exactly. Like, we're going to talk about this, when's good. And sometimes it's like you can't talk. I've heard you say this, Adita, like you didn't talk about it in the moment, or sometimes it's happening in the moment and now it's not a good time because everybody's like mad. Like everyone's like, triggered and mad, and like now it's not the time to deal with it, but we're going to deal with it, just like not right this second. Kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And what about verbally or written?
Yeah, I heard that. Or I was going to respond to that, and my initial reaction was like, take care of yourself. Like if you feel like written is protecting yourself, and that's how you want to enter into the conversation, I would say then write it. I mean, I'm trying to get you there. So if that feels like your way in, then
yeah,
that way if it feels most safe.
So can we go on to some examples, because I think that and Adita, I'm going to use my examples, but feel free to jump in and comment on these, because I think it's really, really, really juicy. So the first example I have was something that actually happened, sometimes microaggressions don't happen in the moment, right? So like sometimes the aggression happens through writing and you have to bring it back later. So that's what happened to me. So just real quick, it was a situation where I was facilitating something for a client. So the dynamic was I had to call in a client, and which is scary because they were paying us a lot of money and they could easily decide not just to stop paying us the money. But I had to call in a client. I was facilitating a session, and in the session there was okay, there's a kind of layers in here. So in the session there was a person who identifies as white who has a history of kind of causing harm and saying problematic things. And so because I knew that about this person, I I was very boundaried with this person as a facilitator. I didn't let them take up as much space as I know that they like to take up. And this is someone who's on the team of the client. And I, did my job as a facilitator to like kind of center people of color, marginalized folks, but not letting that person take up as much space as they want to. And I learned that the client, my client, who the person who pays me, was upset about it. Also a white person, thought I was shutting that person down, and told me in writing, didn't tell me directly, but told me in writing basically that I was shutting that person down, and I would say, had feelings like that they weren't really expressing, but kind of came out sideways. Wouldn't you say, Adita, in the written?
Yeah, it came
Yeah.
outside. That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, so I kind of was like taken aback by the person's by the written feedback that I was given. And going back to our last session on imposter syndrome, it like I kind of freaked out. I was like, wait a second, like, did I mess up? Like, how was I messing up? You're like, I started to question like the whole way I facilitate and all these things. And I realized, no, Lynn, what I'm doing is I was not shutting the person down. I was very kind. But I was holding strong boundaries, and that's my job as a facilitator, especially in spaces like this. And so I basically had to. So I used this framework. So then I had to do that piece where I said I didn't write. I reached out in writing to my client saying that I was having feelings about the feedback that was given, and that I would like to discuss it. So I started the conversation in writing by saying I want to discuss it verbally. So we scheduled a meeting, and then I followed this framework. So here's what happened. I explained that that when I received their message, that I explained my feelings. I noticed that I was feeling angry. I noticed I was feeling like I was being questioned in terms of my expertise, and this is what I was being brought in to do. I noticed that I was being asked to kind of center like this white comfort. I said all those things, and the impact was that I was feeling like the impact was that a little bit of trust was broken between us. That I felt like I wasn't being trusted and I was having a hard time knowing how to move forward. So moving forward, my desired outcome is that when things come up, I ask this person to like, let's discuss it, like, quickly, so we could talk about it. And we can talk further about what it means to facilitate in spaces like this. And we can talk more about facilitating those kind of spaces. And it worked out great. I mean, like, it took a while to kind of go through this. Sometimes this framework takes a while, right? It doesn't, like, you don't just say, I noticed, here's what happened, here's what I want. It kind of took an hour of conversation, took maybe for the follow-up, but it wound up being something where I felt like I was heard. They felt like they were heard. They took it in, understood. Trust was restored. Is there anything about that? So you were there, Adita.
Yeah, no, I think that there was like a loss of context for the self-reliant, but it didn't really matter. Like, because they didn't know that harm was being caused by this person to Black and brown folks. But it didn't really matter because they were in those rooms, and they at this point, and to someone's point over here, they needed to believe what Lynn was telling them to be true, what her experience was.
Yeah.
But we got there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one framework that, you know, when you get to the conversation, whether it's immediately or it has to happen later, this is a way to kind of start with, here's what I'm noticing, right? Let's stop, let's pause. Here's what I'm noticing. Here's what's happening, or here's what happened. And then then describing the impact of that, and then describing the desired outcome. Framework 2 is actually kind of coming up in the comments a little bit, which I love, and this is a really great one. This is one where you what I heard you say. This is what I heard you say, and you repeat it like what they said in a neutral tone. Is that what you meant? Or again, people are sort of saying, what did you mean by that? So I heard you say. So I'm going to actually, instead of using mine, I'm going to use, go back to Jeffrey. I heard you say, because of the way she looks, that's why our food was late. What did you mean by that? Sometimes we use, is that what you meant, in a scenario where, you know, sometimes people just say like, you know, you could say, did you mean to say that she was slow because of ... Is that what you meant to say? And it brings the conversation, it brings it back on them, right? To understand, oh, wait, I said this thing, and I don't know if I meant to cause, oh, wait, you're saying I caused harm? Oh, I don't think I meant to cause harm, but, right? So it kind of brings them into it, and it takes it off the rest of us who are holding all this tension. Yeah. Dita?
Yeah, no, I'm just like, yes.
Yeah. So those are just a couple of frameworks in terms of being the initiator, a way in. Here's what I noticed, and then this is what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? There's a third framework.
Yeah, so now we're moving on to the receiver. So someone is giving you feedback or calling you in on something, perhaps it's a microaggression. And this is like the ideal scenario. So we're giving this to you knowing very well that most of the time, I would say in these circumstances where you have a situation, a conversation like this, most folks have not been to this training or a training, a similar one, where they've learned how to properly receive feedback. And even so, most folks, I think, tend to just respond with defensiveness. But that said, we are trying to become better people. And so we're going to give you the ideal situation for how you can respond when you are called in or given feedback in general. The first thing that you want to do is counter to maybe everything your body is feeling when you're receiving feedback. Maybe not. Maybe you're here already, and that's amazing. It's acknowledging the feedback with gratitude. It's the fact that this person is taking the time and energy to give you this information and to respond to you and to continue in conversation with you. And to give you this feedback is a gift. And so we need to be thankful for that. And I'll give you a situation that's coming up for me recently where I had this framework in mind. But the second thing you want to do is try your best to replace defensiveness with curiosity and empathy. Why is this person saying this? Wait, where are they coming from? What experience do I not have? Where are my privileges that I'm not seeing, that I'm being called in for this, or what did I miss? And empathy, have empathy for the person and believe them, right? That's really important. Somebody had said, like, if you wait too long, this person forgot. I think it's important as receivers that we are not questioning the person in their experience, that we start from believing marginalized folks. And then the third one is the follow up and follow through. This is like like level 3. So you have like gone and reflected on the situation. Maybe you read something, watched a video, talked to someone, and just like further learning and understanding. And then you can come back to that person if you have the relationship with them, or if you're trying to build a relationship and build on that trust that Lynn was talking about by letting them know, like, I just wanted to come back and thank you again for letting me know. Let me just give you a situation. So about a month ago, I was at the park with my 5-year-old daughter, her best friend, and her best friend's mother. And this is, I see her at drop off and stuff, and we do the wave, but this was like the first official play date. Like, I'm new to all of this as a mom, by the way, so I'm like, entering new territory here. But so this was the first official play date. So my daughter's best friend is Indian, and her mother is born in India, from India. And so we were speaking about, that's relevant in a second. So I was talking about work and job and having a job and owning this business. And I don't know about this day, what I was talking about, but blah, 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 blah. And she kind of stops me in my tracks and says, and starts to tell me about her situation and how I'm, call me in on my privilege, basically, that I am able to have a job, that I'm able to start a business, because her situation is very different from that. As an immigrant, she would need to go back to India for an entire year, leave her family, be away from them for a year to come back. So this was a call-in about immigration status and my privilege as a citizen. And so I was very thankful for that moment, because it opened my eyes and just was a good learning for me. And so I did this, and I thanked her for that information, and for, I don't think I use like DEI terms when I'm talking to Play Mom Park data, but I used other words, thanking her and for her generosity really in that moment to share that with me, to be vulnerable and to call me in.
Can I ask you a question? That's a great story. And then that piece, follow up and follow through. Did you do that in that instance? Or
I did it later. Like? I actually did it later, because I think so in the moment, I don't think I actually said, thank you so much. I think that came later. In the moment, I was like listening and like gratitude more so in like, in the way that the conversation went on. And I think it was later on at a pickup that I had, because now I talk to her every day, that I had talked to her and I said, I wanted to bring up our conversation and thank you. I hadn't thought about that way. And it was the first time I had ever thought about that, but that was later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, like you said, before you saw her at pickup, now you talk to her every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I would say, right, it's because of that moment, going back to like that moment of being courageous. Like, she was courageous enough to be vulnerable with you, to explain her immigration status and what it was like for her. And she like had that little moment of trust with you. You didn't break that trust. You like built on that trust by receiving her story and reflecting on it. And then trust was built, and your relationship is building upon that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing, going back to the why we do this, right? Why it's important. Because avoiding these kind of conversations keeps everything stuck. Like, we're here to make change. Like, you are change lawyers. You're here to make change. You're here to make, and that change takes connections, and it takes us really connecting to each other, connecting to the work. Again, it's not about like it was an amazing opportunity because she risked something. Your daughter's friend's mom risked something. And the risk is paying off, right? And even still, if you had not received, if you'd been defensive and been like, whatever, like my mom was an immigrant, I understand what that means, da, 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 don't tell me, then yes, it would have been a broken relationship, but she would have at least practiced her courage. Like she would have at least been living in her truth.
Yeah. And I think just reflecting a little bit more on it, and I hadn't thought of this until right now, was the fact that I continued to engage in conversation with her. Whereas a lot of times when I'm calling folks in from around the neighborhood, Lynn knows, and other, parents that I'm trying to socialize with, it gets really quiet. And like folks aren't even willing to like engage. Like they may not be defensive, but the conversation shuts down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what happens, right? So I love this slide, this idea. Adita always says, expect the unexpected. So here we are. We've taken 45 minutes to go through this. And it's like, here you go. Practice the pause, do these things, and we have these frameworks, and they look really neat and tidy on the slide. But we know that those things don't happen the same way. Like you might have to keep noticing. So when you expect the unexpected, you can realize that cycle of notice name is a cycle. You can keep repeating notice name, notice name, notice name, right? So you call somebody in and it's like, oh, I'm noticing that you seem uncomfortable, lady from the block, right? Like in your case, Adita, do you want to talk about that? Or I'm noticing some defensiveness. Do you want to talk about that? So that kind of knowing that it could go on, and it could go on over a long period of time. Can you talk to the boundaries piece actually?
Yeah, I sort of touched on it earlier, but it's about when conversations become unproductive. Is that a word? That sounds weird today. When conversations become unproductive, and you know when it gets there, is just giving yourself also permission. We're not giving anyone else permission, giving yourself permission. Like you get to stop the conversation altogether. If this is like, all right, I risked my risk, I did my thing, and this is not moving forward. Like it is not on you to, Lynn, what was it that you said earlier? Like move the other person forward. I like how you said it. I don't know, whatever it was.
It's not up to you to change their hearts and minds, really. I mean, yeah, but I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, and so you can say that, you can practice the pause again. So I'm going to pause this conversation. We can come back to it at another time, or you might not want to come back to it at all. I think that in some, you're all in different scenarios, but like we're talking about, if we're talking about like a classic work setting, this is perhaps where you can get an ally involved, maybe HR. There's scenarios like that too, where you may want to take that path as well. It's not going to be relevant to everyone in the room, but I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, always return to the why. You return to your values, return to the why. Remember that even though, like Adita said, this feels, this work always feels uncomfortable. It always feels hard. People always react poorly to feedback. Not always, but often react poorly. It's the work, and it is building our courage muscles. It is allowing us to engage in the noticing and naming over and over and over again. One thing I want to add too is one policy that we have at Hello Social Impact is to bring a buddy. We always go into situations with each other, and it's kind of like a safety plan. So when you expect to go into a conversation with someone that you think that person might not, react the best way, whatever, don't go in alone. Say, hey, I want to schedule time to talk with you. With Adita will be there too. Like she's got my back. That kind of thing. You can kind of be there for each other. Because ultimately, if you're watching this and you're in a position of leadership in your organization, you want to create a culture inside of your organization where these kind of courageous conversations can happen. We have a client who we've been working with for a long time who recently was talking about how the more they go into this work and the more that they are committed to an anti-racist culture, that the complaints, complaints and invitations for courageous conversations are going up, not down. And she's like, and that's good. That's good because we're in a space where we're not like suffering in silence, right? We're like, hey, I'm calling you in on this thing. Let's call each other in on this. So we want to create this culture where these conversations can happen because that's where trust is built and courage is built. You have a question here, Adita. Would you characterize it as comments to microaggression though?
I don't know. Would you? Call me in if you think it was.
I don't know if defining microaggression is important, but I appreciate the other mom calling her in regarding her privilege.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think you said anything that was microaggressive, or you just weren't like paying attention to your privilege?
I don't think I said like a textbook. I don't think it was a textbook microaggression, but it was just like a recent example of being called in and where I got to practice the receiver, even if it wasn't a microaggression. But by all means, if somebody in the room thinks they heard something,
yeah,
call me in.
So Maricela is also asking us maybe if defining a microaggression is important here. I don't have one off the top of my head. I don't know if you do, Adita, but can you get like we can think of an example in that situation. If you were to talk to your daughter's friend's mom and have said something, some people say that microaggressions aren't micro at all. Like there's kind of, most microaggressions don't feel very small, even though micro is there. Sometimes they feel pretty large and have a huge impact.
I mean, it's gray because it could be because of it is, related to, sorry, I'm like now still pondering, like, was it a microaggression?
Yeah.
Generally.
Maybe not. It depends on how it was received, I think. So like, because it depends how it's perceived. Because sometimes I wish I had a definition of
well, I can say this. I can say from the book, the definition from the book, subtle acts of exclusion. It's a subtle act of exclusion by the Tiffany Jana book.
Yes.
How they define microaggressions. It's a subtle act of exclusion. So, hey, maybe by that definition. And
so it could have felt like you're not recognized, you're trying to bond with me. So I'm like going to be your friend. Mm-hmm. You're trying to bond with me about how much work sucks, but like, don't bond with me over that. Don't bond with me over that. Like, you can't get to work. Like, don't you see that, like, not everyone gets to be in your position? That could have felt, to someone else, it could have felt like, oh, no big deal. But it could have felt like a subtle act of exclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, could have.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Carlos put in the chat a link to sign up for the Hella community. So this is actually, you're not signing up yet because the Hella community is not launched yet. We're in beta. And what the Hella community is we often work with organizational clients on like kind of big DEI culture change stuff. But we realized that we also need to work with other folks, with entrepreneurs who are running small businesses, with individual sole practitioners, creators, influencers, folks who are like, look, I personally in my small micro enterprise am wanting to advocate for racial justice, and I'm ready. I'm here for it. I just want the connection. I want more skills, and I want to continue to be kind of practicing my courageous leadership. And so in that effort, we are launching a professional community of entrepreneurs and professionals who are showing up for racial justice in their work. And we launch in June. So if you're interested in like being on the wait list, there is there's the place to sign up for that. Okay. Oh my gosh. Really? 4 minutes. Okay. Also, I want to say that our next session, this goes by so fast. Our next session is on is all about values, and it is about it's called Hella Values and Vision: Owning Your Values and Showing Up for Yourself. So as we talk today about like understanding what's most important to you, and so that you know that no matter what, like when you're really clear on your values, these courageous conversations become a little bit easier because you're willing to stand by those values no matter what. So we're going to talk about that. And again, I'm going to use the research of Brene Brown because she has such really important research around courageous leadership that's going to help us that we are integrating into a racial justice context. So there is some pre-work. She has this list of different values. And if you want homework for next time, if you look at that list, and the key is it's a list of like dozens and dozens of words and dozens of values. But your homework is to look at those and try to narrow it down to the 2 most important values to you, which is hard to do. It's hard to do. So when you click this link that is being featured in a second to get resources from this class, so you'll get the presentation, the slides that we showed you. You'll get the link to the Courageous Leadership Assessment, and you'll get the pre-work for next time. So sign up and get that there.
The last thing I want to say really quick, I can't leave without saying that it's about impact over intention, and I'll leave with like a little closing thing in a minute. So just remember that whether you're the person who did something or something was done and someone's trying to tell you, well, I didn't mean to, that wasn't my intention. Remind yourself and remind them it's about impact over intention. I even tell my kid that, like, you stepped on my toe, it hurts. I didn't mean to. Yeah, but you should still apologize and ask me if my toe's okay. Yeah. So anyways. Right. Okay, so in our closing moments, I just want to take a moment for us to close our eyes and to picture yourself in a situation, whether it is the office scenario with Jeffrey, a situation that actually happened in the past, or something that you might anticipate happening in the future with someone in your life because of your relationship or how they are, whatever it is. Picture yourself practicing the pause, just saying taking that breath, saying those first few words, and stopping a conversation to begin a courageous one. I want to pause this conversation. And everyone take a deep breath in and out. And have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you so much, Adita. We'll see you in May for our next conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I was taking a lot of notes, and I feel just as stressed as I did before about confronting microaggressions, but at least I know that I'm not alone, and that I think adds some sort of comfort to it. So thank you for joining us. Join us next week. We'll be doing a webinar on how to interview, how to improve your interview skills. We're in the middle of the Great Resignation, and in particular in the law, there's a lot of folks who are considering their career and sort of looking back and seeing what comes next for them. So we're going to be talking about how to best interview next time. The link for that webinar is in the description box. And if you want to sign up for Hella Social Impact's next webinar, which is going to be on values, you can also use the link in the registration box. Thank you to all of the folks for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time.